The gunshot cracked across the empty gas station lot, just as the neon "Open 24 hours" sign flickered and died, and Daniel Mercer felt the world tilt sideways, before he even realized the sound had come from his own hand. The revolver jerked in his grip. A man collapsed beside pump number 3. For a second, the only noise was the buzzing of the broken light above the pumps and the distant hum of trucks on Interstate 95. Daniel's chest tightened. His ears rang. The smell of gasoline mixed with burnt powder. The man on the pavement was clutching his stomach, gasping in wet, desperate breaths. "Jesus. Jesus Christ," Daniel whispered. The revolver felt like it weighed 50 pounds. The man rolled onto his side, groaning. Daniel recognized him then. Mark Caldwell, the town contractor, the guy who owned half the construction permits in Ridgway County, the man who had been sitting in the driver's seat of Daniel's truck 5 minutes ago with a gun pointed at Daniel's ribs. Now Mark's blood was pooling beneath him. The gas station clerk inside had not yet looked up. The television above the soda cooler was blaring a late-night sports recap. Daniel's hands shook violently. He tried to breathe, tried to think. "You weren't supposed to pull the gun," Daniel muttered, half to himself, half to the dying man. Mark's eyes were wide and furious even through the pain. You stupid son of a..." The rest dissolved into a cough that sprayed blood across the pavement. Daniel staggered backward until his hip hit the side of his pickup truck. His brain refused to catch up to what had happened. 10 minutes ago, he had been driving home from a 12-hour shift pouring concrete at the new subdivision outside town. 10 minutes ago, life had been miserable but normal. Now there was a man bleeding out beside a gas pump in rural North Carolina. A pair of headlights turned onto the highway a quarter-mile away. Daniel panicked. If someone pulled in, if anyone saw this. He looked down at the revolver. Mark's revolver. Not his. Daniel hadn't owned a gun in years. Not since the divorce. He swallowed hard and stepped toward Mark again. "Listen," Daniel said, his voice trembling. "You came at me first. You remember that. You remember you came at me." Mark tried to laugh, but it turned into another choking cough. His hand grabbed Daniel's jacket. The grip was surprisingly strong. "You think this ends here?" Mark rasped. Daniel froze. "What?" Mark's blood-slick fingers tightened. "You don't even know what you just stepped into." Then, his grip loosened. His head rolled to the side. The buzzing light above them flickered again. Daniel stared at the body. For a long moment he simply stood there. Then the gas station door opened with a cheerful chime. "Hey man, Pump 3's card reader," the teenage clerk began. Daniel spun around. The kid stopped mid-sentence. His eyes dropped to the body, the revolver in Daniel's hand, the spreading blood. Silence hung heavy for half a heartbeat. Then the kid screamed. The sheriff's office smelled like stale coffee and damp paperwork. Sheriff Linda Garvey leaned back in her chair, staring at the evidence photo spread across her desk. Mark Caldwell's body under a yellow tarp beside Pump 3. A construction worker named Daniel Mercer sitting on the curb with both hands raised. The revolver lying 5 feet away. Self-defense. That was the claim. Linda had been sheriff of Ridgway County for 11 years. She had seen enough crime scenes to know when something felt wrong. And this one did. Deputy Ruiz leaned in the doorway holding a paper cup of coffee. "State boys say ballistics match Caldwell's gun. Mercer's prints only on the grip." Linda nodded slowly. "And Caldwell? Records clean. On paper." Linda snorted. "Nobody builds half the county without stepping on some toes." Ruiz shrugged. "Mercer swears Caldwell tried to carjack him." Linda tapped the photo with one finger. "At a gas station in the middle of nowhere?" Ruiz took a sip of coffee. "Maybe Caldwell was drunk. Maybe he was desperate. Maybe Mercer got lucky." Linda looked through the office window toward the holding room. Daniel Mercer sat alone on the bench, shoulders slumped, hands clasped between his knees. He looked like a man who had been run over by his own life. Linda stood. "Let's talk to him." Inside the holding room, Daniel looked up as the sheriff entered. His eyes were bloodshot but steady. Linda pulled out the chair across from him. "Mr. Mercer," she said calmly, "walk me through it again." Daniel exhaled slowly. "I told the deputy everything. Humor me." Daniel rubbed his hands together. "I was pumping gas. Caldwell's truck pulled in behind me. He got out, started yelling about some money I supposedly owed him." Linda raised an eyebrow. "You owe him money?" "No." Daniel shook his head. "I've never done business with him." Linda leaned forward. "Then why would he think that?" Daniel hesitated. "Just for a second." Linda noticed. "I don't know," he said. Linda watched his face carefully. "Then what?" Daniel continued. "He pulled the gun. Said I had something that belonged to him. Tried to force me into my own truck. I grabbed the gun. It went off." Ruiz shifted his weight by the door. Linda held Daniel's gaze. What did he think you had? Daniel's jaw tightened. I told you. I don't know. Linda leaned back again. Silence stretched across the room. Daniel looked exhausted, but there was something else there too. Something guarded. Linda stood slowly. All right, she said. For now, it looks like self-defense. Daniel's shoulders sagged slightly. But, Linda continued, things in Ridgeway County have a habit of getting complicated. Daniel met her eyes. Sheriff, I didn't mean to kill anyone. Linda believed that part, but belief didn't mean truth. Outside the station, rain began tapping against the windows. Across town, in a quiet suburban house, 16-year-old Emma Mercer sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone as the headline loaded on the local news app. Construction worker involved in gas station shooting. Her father's name was in the second paragraph. Emma's stomach twisted. Downstairs, the front door slammed open. Her mother, Rachel Mercer, rushed into the living room still wearing her hospital scrubs. Emma? Rachel called. Emma slowly walked to the top of the stairs. Mom, Dad shot someone. Rachel froze halfway across the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rachel whispered, That can't be right. Emma turned the phone toward her. Rachel read the article. Her face drained of color. No, she murmured. No, Daniel wouldn't. Her voice trailed off, because part of her knew something Emma didn't, something from before the divorce. Before Daniel moved into the small rental outside town, something about Daniel's past that had never quite made sense. Emma watched her mother carefully. You knew this was possible, Emma said quietly. Rachel snapped her eyes upward. What? You're not even surprised. Rachel forced a weak smile. Honey, your father is not a violent man. Emma crossed her arms. Then why does it feel like you're lying? Rachel had no answer. At the county hospital, Mark Caldwell's younger brother Tyler paced the hallway outside the emergency room, where doctors had officially pronounced Mark dead 30 minutes earlier. Tyler Caldwell was a large man with a shaved head and construction tattoos running up both arms. His phone buzzed repeatedly in his hand. Each time he ignored it. Finally, he stopped pacing. His jaw clenched. A nurse passed him quietly, without meeting his eyes. Tyler looked down at his phone again. One unread message from a number he didn't recognize. The message contained only 3 words. He knows now. Tyler's stomach tightened. Slowly he typed back. Who? The reply came instantly. Daniel Mercer. Tyler stared at the message. Then he began to laugh. It was not a pleasant sound. Well, Tyler muttered under his breath, this just got interesting. He turned toward the exit doors of the hospital. Outside rain poured across the parking lot under the harsh yellow glow of the streetlights. Tyler Caldwell stepped into the storm and pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders. His brother was dead, but whatever had been set in motion tonight was clearly just beginning. By sunrise, the whole county had chosen a version of what happened, and none of them matched. At May's diner, men in work boots said Daniel Mercer had finally snapped because divorce and debt would break anybody if you pressed hard enough. At the courthouse annex, clerks whispered that Mark Caldwell had been dirty for years, and maybe this was the first time somebody fought back. At Ridgeway High, Emma heard 3 different girls say her dad was either a hero, a murderer, or a psycho, and by second period, she had turned her phone off because every vibration felt like another hand shoving her down a hallway she could not control. Rachel drove straight from a sleepless night into the sheriff's office parking lot, with a cold coffee in the cup holder, and both hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles hurt. She sat there a minute before getting out. She already knew Daniel would look wrecked. She was not prepared for the way he looked old. Not tired. Not scared. Old. Like the last 12 hours had reached into him and dragged 10 hidden years into the light. He was sitting at a metal table in one of the interview rooms when they let her in. His eyes lifted to her, and for a second, neither of them spoke, because divorced people learn strange forms of silence. They learn how to stand in the wreckage of old intimacy and pretend it is normal. Rachel closed the door behind her. Emma knows, she said. Daniel nodded once. I figured. She saw the news before I could get to her. I'm sorry. Rachel laughed once, short and bitter. You're sorry. She pulled out the chair and sat across from him. Daniel, what did you do? He looked down at his hands. There was a half-moon cut on his thumb from the struggle at the gas station. He seemed fixated on it. What I told the sheriff is what happened. Rachel studied him. That is not what I asked. He finally met her eyes. He pulled a gun on me. Why? I don't know. Rachel's expression hardened. Don't do that with me. Daniel's jaw flexed. The room seemed to shrink around them. I'm not lying. You are absolutely lying. Maybe not about the gun. Maybe not about the shot. but about why Mark Caldwell was in your face at 1 in the morning. Rachel leaned closer. You disappear emotionally for months. You start taking side jobs you never explain. Strange numbers call the house asking for you, then hang up when I answer. You say it's nothing. Now a local contractor ends up dead, and his last words to you, according to the sheriff, suggest something bigger. So I'm asking you once, and I need you to hear me, Daniel. Is Emma in danger? That landed. His face changed before he could stop it. Rachel saw it and went cold all over. Daniel. He inhaled sharply, then looked away again. I don't know. That means yes. It means, I don't know. His voice cracked, then hardened again. Rach, listen to me. I never wanted any of this near you or Emma. Near us? She repeated. Daniel, it's in the sheriff's office. It's on the local news. Emma is walking around school with your name attached to a killing. He shut his eyes for one long moment. I know. Rachel's anger faltered just enough for fear to take over. What did he think you had? She asked quietly. Daniel said nothing. Rachel stood so fast the chair legs scraped the floor. You still think you can protect people by shutting them out? You always did. He looked up. Rachel. No. Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. You lost the right to ask me for trust when you started deciding what I could survive. She turned and went to the door, then stopped with her hand on the knob. Without facing him, she asked, Did you kill him because you were afraid for your life? Or because you were afraid of what he'd say next? Daniel opened his mouth, but no answer came before she walked out. Sheriff Garvey watched Rachel leave from the front desk and could tell by the woman's face that the marriage had ended long before the paperwork caught up. Linda waited a full minute before going into the evidence room herself. On the table lay Caldwell's phone, wallet, keys, and the contents of his truck. Standard inventory, loose receipts, 2 burner phones, a folded county zoning map with 3 parcels circled in red, and a cheap motel keycard from the Briarwood Inn out by Route 17. Ruiz stood over the table with gloves on. Found this tucked under the driver's seat, he said, holding up a manila envelope. Linda took it. No label, no markings. Inside was a flash drive and a Polaroid photograph. She studied the photo first. It showed a little girl on a swing set in a public park, taken from far enough away that the image was grainy but clear enough to identify the child. Linda felt her stomach drop. It was Emma Mercer. There was a date written in black marker at the bottom from 3 days earlier. Ruiz swore softly under his breath. That's not random, he said. Linda's voice went flat. No. She set the photo down very carefully, as if anger itself might contaminate it, then turned the flash drive over in her gloved hand. Get this, to County It. I want it opened on an isolated machine. Ruiz nodded. And Mercer? Linda looked through the evidence room window toward the hall. Now I know he's hiding something because if Mark Caldwell had a picture of Mercer's daughter, this wasn't about money. She paused. But that doesn't tell me whether Daniel Mercer is in danger, or if he is the danger. At school, Emma made it through lunch by sitting in the far corner of the cafeteria with her earbuds in and music playing loud enough to drown out the room. She didn't eat. At one point, her friend Kayla sat down across from her and mouthed, You okay? Emma pulled out one earbud and almost laughed at the uselessness of the question. No, she said. Kayla glanced around. People are being gross. People are always gross. Kayla lowered her voice. For what it's worth, my dad says Caldwell was bad news. Emma stared at the unopened milk carton on her tray. My dad says it was self-defense. Do you believe him? Emma looked up. Kayla instantly regretted it. Sorry, she said. Emma shrugged, though the movement felt brittle. I don't know what I believe. Her phone buzzed in her hoodie pocket. Unknown number. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Another message from the same number. Finally, she checked it. Stay away from the park after dark. Emma's blood ran cold. She looked around the cafeteria as if someone might be watching her from behind the vending machines or the lunch line or the trophy case by the gym doors. What? Kayla asked. Emma locked the screen and stood. I have to go. Go where? But Emma was already walking fast toward the girls' bathroom, heart slamming, phone clutched hard in her hand. Once inside, she locked herself in a stall and stared at the message again. A third bubble appeared. Ask your father about Lot 14. Her breathing turned shallow. Lot 14 meant nothing to her, but whoever sent it knew her number. Knew the park. Knew enough to make the hairs on her arms stand up. She called her mother first. Rachel answered on the second ring, voice already tense. Emma? Mom, I got a weird text. Rachel was silent for one beat too long. What kind of weird text? Emma read the messages out loud. Rachel's inhale was sharp enough to hear. Listen to me, she said. Go to the front office right now. Don't wait for your next class. I'm coming to get you. Mom, what is lot 14? I don't know. Just go. You sound scared. Rachel forced her voice steadier. I am being careful. There's a difference. Go to the office. When the call ended, Emma stayed in the locked stall another 10 seconds, staring at the peeling paint on the door, trying to decide whether caution was the same thing as panic, and whether either one mattered if somebody had decided to make her part of whatever was happening to her father. Tyler Caldwell spent the afternoon at one of Mark's old job sites, a half-finished luxury development on the edge of marshland where the air smelled like wet lumber and diesel. Workers had been sent home. The place sat silent except for flapping plastic sheeting and the distant clank of unsecured metal in the wind. Tyler stood inside the framed skeleton of what would eventually be a model home and listened to the voicemail Mark had left him at 12:14 a.m., the voicemail he had ignored because his brother had a habit of sounding urgent when he was drunk. If I'm right, he's got it, Mark had said, voice low and rushed. Mercer, Daniel Mercer. I'm heading to meet him now. If this goes sideways, check the motel first. Then, the lot. The message ended. Tyler replayed it once more, jaw hard. He knew better than most that his brother had become reckless the last year. Mark had started juggling too many debts, too many favors, too many people who did not send overdue notices through lawyers. Still, Mark was not stupid. If he believed Mercer had something worth killing over, Tyler believed it too. Boots crunched on plywood behind him. A man in a gray rain jacket stepped through the studs, face partly hidden by the raised collar. Tyler did not turn right away. You took your time, Tyler said. The man shrugged. Wanted to see how the town reacted. Tyler faced him then. The man was lean, mid-40s maybe, clean-shaven, forgettable in a way that felt deliberate. You texted me from a burner, Tyler said. Said Mercer knows now. What exactly does he know? The man glanced toward the open lot as if even empty land had ears. Maybe not everything, maybe enough. Tyler stepped closer. Mark's dead. Yes. So start talking. The man's expression did not change. Your brother got impatient. He approached Mercer too soon. We had no confirmation. Mercer understood what he'd found. Tyler's eyes narrowed. Found where? The man held his gaze but said nothing. Tyler smiled without humor. You know, I spent a lot of years cleaning up Mark's messes. Guys he cheated, suppliers he lied to, women he promised things he never intended to give. I can usually tell when somebody's trying to recruit me into the next mess before I understand the first one. He stepped even closer. So, I'll ask once. Are you here to help me avenge my brother, or are you here to make sure I don't pull on a thread that leads back to you? For the first time, the man looked mildly impressed. Those may be the same thing, he said. Tyler studied him, then barked a dry laugh. That's what I was afraid of. Back at the sheriff's office, County IT finally cracked the flash drive. Linda and Ruiz watched from behind a tech's shoulder as folder after folder populated the screen. Scanned permits, construction bids, environmental reports, then a second hidden directory the tech almost missed. He opened it. Videos, photos, audio files. Linda leaned in. The first video showed a drone shot of a wooded parcel off County Road 8. The next showed dump trucks entering the site after dark. The third showed men in reflective vests burying drums in a cleared pit. A date stamp from 6 months earlier glowed in the corner. Ruiz muttered, "What the hell is this?" Linda didn't answer. The fourth file was audio only. 2 men talking inside a truck cab. One was clearly Mark Caldwell. The other voice was older, smoother, educated. The county tests won't go past the first layer, the older man said. Once the foundations are poured, nobody digs. Mark laughed. And if they do? Then we make sure they regret it. Linda's face hardened. She recognized the second voice after 7 seconds. County Commissioner Ben Sutter. Ruiz looked at her. You sure? I'm sure. They listened through the rest in silence. By the time the last file ended, a different shape of fear had settled over the room. Not the hot fear of violence. The cold fear of institutions. Of realizing the rot was not at the edge of town in a motel room or a gas station parking lot, but inside permit offices, elected seats, bank loans, and development boards. Linda straightened slowly. Lock this room down, she said. No one touches anything without me. Ruiz nodded. You think Mercer found this? I think Caldwell believed he did. She looked again at Emma's surveillance photo. And I think somebody decided pressure on a father works best through a daughter. Ruiz's voice dropped. We calling state? Linda considered it. In a clean world. Yes. In a clean world, you handed this to the State Bureau and trusted the chain of command. But Ben Sutter had friends in Raleigh. He had donors. He had cousins in neighboring counties. He had spent 15 years building the kind of smiling local power that survived by knowing exactly who needed a favor and who needed a threat. Not yet, Linda said. First, I need to know whether Daniel Mercer is part of this because he got caught in it, or because he's been standing in it for longer than he's admitted. That answer started arriving an hour later, when Daniel finally asked for a lawyer and then, before they could arrange it, changed his mind. Linda entered the room alone this time. Daniel looked wrung out, but something in him had shifted. Not calmer, more cornered. Sometimes that made people lie harder. Sometimes it made them break. Linda set the Polaroid on the table in front of him. She said nothing. Daniel looked down. Every trace of color left his face. He did not touch the photograph. He didn't need to. Where did you get that? He asked. In Caldwell's truck. Linda watched him carefully. Tell me the truth now. Daniel swallowed. I don't know anything about that photo. I believe you. That surprised him enough to show. Linda continued. I also believe Mark Caldwell didn't carry around pictures of teenage girls for sentimental reasons. So let's try again. What did he think you had? Daniel stared at Emma's image on the swing. When he spoke, his voice was rough. 3 weeks ago, I was working a foundation pour out near Marsh Lane. New development, county approved. Supposed to be easy money. During grading, one of the machine operators hit something buried. He paused. Metal drums. Linda stayed very still. What did you do? What everybody does when there's a problem and the boss doesn't want questions. We got told to stop. Then Caldwell himself showed up. He sent most of the crew off for an early lunch, kept me and 2 others back to move some dirt. I saw one of the drums split open. Black sludge, chemical smell. Real bad. He rubbed his forehead. One of the younger guys started taking pictures on his phone because he thought maybe the company was going to deny it later and blame the crew. Caldwell saw him, took the phone, smashed it, told us none of us saw anything. Linda asked, Why you? Daniel gave a short, humorless laugh. Because I didn't keep my mouth shut. I told him somebody needed to call environmental. He got in my face, said men with mortgages and custody schedules should think very hard before becoming heroes. Linda's eyes sharpened. He mentioned Emma then? Daniel nodded once. Not by name, just enough. And after that? I backed off. Shame flickered across his face, hot and ugly. I told myself I was protecting my kid. A week later, I noticed a truck following me home from work. Different truck, same feeling. Then 2 nights ago, I got an envelope slid under my apartment door. What envelope? A zoning map with 1 parcel circled. Lot 14, at the Briarwood Storage Annex. No note. Linda thought of Emma's text. Ask your father about Lot 14. Did you go? Yes. He looked sick at the memory. Storage unit. Padlock already cut. Inside, there was a toolbox with a hard drive, some paper copies, and a ledger. I didn't understand half of it, but enough to know it was about the development sites and money moving through shell companies. I took it. Linda leaned in. Where is it now? Daniel hesitated. Safe. Daniel. Safe, he repeated. That's the only answer I'm giving until I know who I can trust. Linda almost snapped at him, but she caught herself. It was infuriating. It was also rational. Caldwell confronted you because he thought you still had it. Yes. Do you? Daniel's silence told her yes, even before he gave the slightest nod. And who sent the envelope? She asked. Daniel shook his head. No idea. Across town, Rachel picked Emma up from school and drove without speaking for several blocks because talking felt dangerous when she was trying that hard to stay composed. Emma sat rigid in the passenger seat, backpack clutched to her chest. Finally, she said, You knew there was something. Rachel kept her eyes on the road. I knew your father had been scared lately. That's not the same. No. Rachel pulled into the church parking lot instead of heading home. The lot was empty, except for a maintenance van. Emma frowned. Why are we here? Because open places feel safer right now than the house. Rachel shut off the engine. For a moment, the quiet inside the car seemed louder than traffic. When I was still married to your dad, she said carefully, there were stretches where he'd get like this. Withdrawn. Always looking out windows. Waking up at every sound. Emma turned toward her. From what? Rachel took a breath. Your father grew up with more violence than he likes to admit. His older brother got mixed up with drugs when they were young. There were raids, debt collectors, threats. Daniel spent a long time trying to become the opposite of where he came from. Emma stared. You never told me any of that. Rachel smiled sadly. Parents make a lot of choices about what becomes family history and what stays locked away. Emma looked back through the windshield at the church sign by the road. Sunday service, community food drive, all are welcome. Maybe he should have trusted me, she said. Rachel's answer came quietly. Maybe he should have. Emma's phone buzzed again. Both of them flinched. This time the message contained only an address. An old farmhouse road outside town. Under it, one sentence. If you want the truth, come alone before sunset. Rachel took the phone from Emma's shaking hand and read it twice. No, she said immediately. Emma reached for it back. Mom, what if whoever's sending this is trying to help? This is not help. You don't know that. Rachel's fear sharpened into anger because anger gave her somewhere to stand. And you don't know anything about the kind of people who use fear to control where someone goes. Emma's voice rose. Then tell me something real for once. The words hung in the car, raw and reckless. Rachel closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she looked more tired than angry. Your father isn't the only one who thought secrets were protection, she said. I let a lot of silence into this family because I thought naming danger would make it more solid. I was wrong. She started the engine. We are going to the sheriff. Emma looked down at the address on her screen. And if they're too late? Rachel didn't answer, because she had already begun to wonder the same thing. Out at the half-built development, Tyler Caldwell watched the gray-jacketed man walk away across the muddy lot, and for the first time since the hospital, he stopped thinking like a grieving brother and started thinking like a survivor. Mark had left him a trail. Mercer had whatever the trail led to. Commissioner Sutter was almost certainly in the middle. That meant two things. Tyler trusted more than grief. Money was involved, and somebody powerful was preparing to cut loose anyone expendable. Tyler had lived too long in his brother's orbit not to recognize the smell of an operation getting ready to eat its own. He pulled out his phone and called a number he had not touched in years. A woman answered on the fourth ring. This better be good, she said. Nina, Tyler said, I need a favor. There was a pause, then a laugh with no warmth in it. Last I heard, your family didn't call unless there was blood. Tyler looked over the empty site toward the marsh. Then I guess you should know there's blood. The wind picked up, rattling the exposed frames of the unfinished homes like bones in a storm, and somewhere in town, though none of them yet understood how close the timelines were about to collide, Daniel Mercer finally leaned across the table toward Sheriff Garvey and said the one thing that changed the shape of the day. The reason I haven't handed it over, he said, voice low and strained, is because the ledger includes names besides Caldwell's, and one of them belongs to someone who came by my apartment last month pretending to ask about a noise complaint. He was wearing a deputy's uniform. Linda did not react right away, which was the only reason Daniel kept talking instead of shutting down again. If she had looked shocked, offended, defensive, anything at all, he probably would have folded back into silence. But Sheriff Garvey just held his gaze with a kind of grim stillness that made room for ugly truth. Which deputy? She asked. Daniel rubbed both hands down his face. I don't know his name. Mid-30s maybe. Thick neck. Buzz cut. Left ear bent like it got broken once. He came to the door around 9 at night. Said somebody had called in a disturbance from my unit. I knew there hadn't been any disturbance. He stood there too long, looking past me into the apartment. Linda's mind began sorting through faces immediately. She kept her voice neutral. Did he identify himself? Not beyond the uniform. Didn't give me a card. Didn't write anything down. Just asked if I'd seen anything suspicious in the neighborhood. Then he looked at the picture of Emma on my fridge and said, Cute kid. High school? Daniel's jaw locked. That was the moment I knew the visit wasn't about noise. Linda felt the muscles in her back go rigid. There were 12 sworn deputies in Ridgeway County, 5 patrol officers, 3 part-timers, and a reserve list. Too many possibilities. Too many men who could fit pieces of that description. Why didn't you report it? She asked, though the answer was already obvious. Daniel let out a dead, hollow sound that might have been a laugh. To who? Linda accepted that. She hated accepting it, but she did. She stood from the table. You're staying here for now. Daniel straightened. That sounds a lot like custody. Call it protective detention if it helps your pride. My daughter's out there, and my people are finding her now. Linda picked up the Polaroid, and slipped it back into the file. If you are holding evidence that can burn half this county to the ground, I need it before somebody else gets to it. Daniel hesitated. It's in a storage locker. Linda waited. He shook his head. I'll take you. Absolutely not. Then you're not getting it. The old stubbornness in his face made her want to put her fist through the wall. Daniel, every minute we waste. I know, he snapped, then lowered his voice. I know, but if that evidence disappears, Emma's not just scared. She's bait. It stays where it is until I know she's under your roof or beside me. Linda studied him for a long moment. Then she said, If I find out you're playing some long game with me, I will bury you under every charge I can think of. Daniel nodded. Fair. Rachel and Emma arrived at the sheriff's office just as a drizzle started silvering the courthouse windows. Linda met them in the lobby before either of them could ask for Daniel. She took one look at Rachel's face and said, "Come with me." Emma noticed the shift immediately. Adults always said everything was fine right before they stopped using casual voices. In Linda's office, Rachel handed over Emma's phone with the farmhouse address still on the screen. Linda read the message twice. "Did anyone besides the sender see this?" she asked. Emma shook her head. "No." "Did you respond?" "No." Linda nodded once, then looked at Rachel. "I need you both here for the moment." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What aren't you saying?" Linda hesitated only because the room now contained too many partial truths and not enough time. "I think Mark Caldwell's death was tied to something bigger than a self-defense encounter." Emma crossed her arms tight against herself. "What kind of bigger?" Linda answered carefully. "The kind that involves land deals, threats, and the possibility that someone has been trying to pressure your father." Rachel's face went white. Because of Emma. Linda did not soften it. "Yes." Emma looked from one adult to another. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Is my dad being honest?" Linda said, "More honest than he was yesterday." It was not the answer Emma wanted, and because she was 16 and afraid and sick of everyone talking around her, she slammed her palm against the sheriff's desk. "Why does everybody keep acting like I can't handle the sentence?" The crack startled all three of them. Emma's eyes filled instantly, which only made her angrier. "If somebody's using me to get to him, then say that. If he screwed something up, then say that. I am done being the last person in the room to know my own life." Rachel moved toward her, but Emma stepped back. Linda watched the girl tremble and thought of the Polaroid, the swing set, the date and marker. "Your father found something dangerous," she said. "Or dangerous people think he found it. Either way, you are not imagining the threat." Emma stared at her, breathing hard. "Then let me see him." Linda considered refusing. Instead, she nodded toward the hall. 5 minutes. Daniel stood when Emma came into the interview room. For a second he looked almost relieved. Then he saw her face and understood that relief had expired. Emma shut the door behind her. "Did they take pictures of me?" she asked. No greeting, no easing in. Daniel closed his eyes. "Yes." The single word landed like metal. Emma's throat tightened. "How long have you known?" "Since this morning." "How long have they known who I was?" Daniel's silence answered that one. Emma laughed in disbelief. "You knew before this morning." "I suspected." "That is not better." She was trying not to cry and failing. "Do you get how crazy this is? I'm at school eating fries and somebody out there knows where I sit, where I walk, what park I used to go to." Daniel took a step closer. "Emma, no." She jabbed a finger toward him. "Don't do the calm voice. Don't do the dad voice where you act like if you sound steady enough then everything becomes manageable." He stopped moving. She wiped at her eyes angrily. "Mom says you grew up around bad stuff. Fine. Lots of people do. But why am I in it now?" Daniel stared at the table because looking at her hurt too much. "Because I made the mistake of thinking I could keep one foot in and one foot out." Emma frowned. "What does that even mean?" He swallowed. "It means when I found out something was wrong at that construction site, I should have gone public immediately, or I should have taken you and your mother and left town. Instead, I tried to be careful, quiet. I told myself I could handle it without blowing up our lives." Emma's expression twisted. "And now?" Daniel met her eyes. "Now I know I was a coward." The honesty of it cracked something in both of them. Emma looked away first. "I don't know how to trust you right now," she said. Daniel nodded once. "I know. And I hate that you sound like you expected that." "Maybe I did." She stood there, breathing through tears, hating him a little, loving him anyway, furious that those things could exist together without canceling each other out. "Are you going to fix it?" she asked finally. Daniel answered, with the only thing he still had left to offer. "I'm going to try." Outside the room, Linda pulled Ruiz aside near the records office. "Quietly," she said. "I want personnel files for every deputy who fits Mercer's description. No chatter, no email, paper only." Ruiz nodded. "You thinking internal leak?" "I'm thinking if Mercer's right, then either somebody in uniform is compromised, or somebody's borrowing a uniform." Ruiz scratched his jaw. Benton could fit parts of it. Maybe Fisk, maybe Laramie, before he grew the mustache. Linda considered each name and disliked all of them. "Start with duty rosters from last month. See who was on evening patrol near Mercer's building." Ruiz headed off. Linda stopped him with one more sentence. "And from this point on, nobody gets told anything they don't absolutely need." The farmhouse address from Emma's text nagged at her like a splinter. If it was a trap, it was a crude one, too direct, too theatrical, which did not mean it was fake. Sometimes desperate people used clumsy methods because elegance belonged to people with time, and desperation belonged to people about to die. She looked through the office window at Rachel sitting stiff in the waiting area, arms around herself, watching every hallway at once. There was a kind of exhaustion unique to women who had been forced into competence by other people's secrecy. Linda recognized it. At 4 in the afternoon, a call came in from County Dispatch about a pickup truck abandoned near the old rail crossing off Weaver Road. No plates. Driver's side door open. Linda almost ignored it until the caller mentioned a manila envelope on the front seat and the smell of gasoline. She took Ruiz and drove out herself. The pickup sat crooked by the ditch, front tires sunk in mud. Nothing nearby but wet fields, a derelict grain silo, and power lines vanishing into a flat gray horizon. The envelope on the seat had Linda's name written across it in thick black marker. She put on gloves and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper torn from a legal pad. "You are late." Beneath it, another address. Briarwood Inn, room 12. Ruiz looked over her shoulder. "Motel keycard in Caldwell's truck," he said. Linda nodded slowly. "Someone wants us moving. Into a trap? Maybe. Or into somebody else's timeline." She looked around the empty road, the fields, the wind flattening tall grass. "Call for backup to stage, 2 miles out. No lights, no sirens." Ruiz reached for his radio. "And Rachel Mercer?" Linda said. "Keep her and Emma inside." But by the time she said it, events were already sliding in other directions. Rachel had spent 20 minutes in the lobby trying not to imagine the shapes fear could take. Then she caught 2 whispered words from a passing deputy. Briarwood Inn. She stood before she fully thought it through. Emma had gone to the restroom. Daniel was locked in an interview room. Nobody was telling her anything because nobody ever told her anything until after the damage was underway. She made one catastrophic decision, and because catastrophic decisions rarely announce themselves as such, it felt at the time like common sense. She stepped out to the parking lot, got into her car, and drove toward Route 17. Emma returned to find her mother gone. Tyler Caldwell reached Briarwood first. The motel crouched beside the highway like a building that had given up on dignity years ago. Peeling green doors, cigarette burns on the walkway rails, a soda machine humming beside the office. Tyler parked under a dead light and scanned the row of rooms. Number 12 sat at the far end, curtains drawn. He moved with the heavy caution of a man who had learned violence from proximity rather than training. When he reached the door, it was already ajar. He pushed it open. The room smelled of bleach and old smoke. A man sat tied to a chair in the middle of the carpet, head slumped, mouth taped shut. Deputy Aaron Fisk. Tyler recognized him from local bars and traffic stops. Fisk lifted his head when Tyler entered, eyes wild over the tape. Tyler shut the door behind him. "Well now," he said softly. "You look like maybe your day is going worse than mine." He ripped the tape off Fisk's mouth in one quick motion. Fisk gasped. "Untie me," he said. Tyler didn't move. "Why?" "Because whoever put me here isn't done." Tyler studied the room. One lamp on. Bathroom door cracked. No visible bag, no note, no obvious camera. "You know my brother's dead," Tyler said. Fisk licked dry lips. "Yeah." "You work for him?" Fisk looked away. That was enough. Tyler leaned one shoulder against the wall. "Then maybe this is exactly where you belong." Fisk's breathing sped up. "Listen to me." Mark got in deeper than he told anybody. Sutter used him. The dump sites, the permits, all of it. Mercer getting hold of the ledger, messed up everything. Now they're trying to clean the whole board. Tyler's face stayed blank. "Who's they?" Fisk gave a frantic laugh. "You think it's one guy? It's never one guy." He jerked his chin toward the bathroom. "There's a phone in the sink. That's why I'm still alive." Tyler approached carefully, opened the bathroom door wider, and saw a burner phone sitting on a stained towel. As if on cue, it began to ring. Both men stared at it. Tyler picked it up but did not answer right away. On the third ring, he accepted the call and said nothing. A woman's voice came through, calm and low. "If Fisk is dead, hang up. If Fisk is alive, listen carefully." Tyler glanced toward the deputy tied to the chair. "Who is this?" "Someone trying to make sure the wrong people don't get to write the ending." Tyler almost smiled. "That's a pretty line. Room 12 is wired." Tyler's smile vanished. "How wired?" "Enough that if the wrong person crosses the threshold next, you won't have to wonder who was meant to die there." Tyler's eyes moved slowly around the room again. The lamp, the vent, the baseboard under the TV stand. "You expecting company?" he asked. "Sheriff Garvey. Maybe Mercer's ex-wife if she's as predictable as I think she is." Tyler's voice dropped. "Why tell me?" Because your brother killed my husband 2 years ago by signing off on buried waste that poisoned a private well. And I have been waiting a very long time for people to start hurting each other in the right order. Tyler went still. Name: Nina Soto. Tyler closed his eyes for half a second. Of course, Mark had mentioned her once, years ago, in the dismissive tone guilty men used for widows they thought had stopped mattering. Nina continued, "Get Fisk out. If you can, stop Garvey from entering. Then go to the county records basement. Locker C. The combination is 1422. Your brother hid copies everywhere because he trusted nobody, not even the people paying him." The line went dead. Tyler lowered the phone slowly. Fisk stared at him. What did she say? Tyler looked at the deputy and made a decision that surprised even him. He bent, cut Fisk loose with the utility knife from his pocket, and hauled him upright. She said, "We move fast." Linda's convoy rolled into the motel lot without lights. She signaled backup to hold. Room 12 glowed faintly through the curtains. No movement. She stepped out, hand near her sidearm, Ruiz at her shoulder. Before they reached the walkway, a sedan came screeching into the lot from the highway entrance. Rachel Mercer jumped out before the engine fully died. "Rachel!" Linda hissed. Rachel ignored her and ran toward the rooms. "My daughter is at your office, and my ex-husband is in your custody, and I am done being told to wait in chairs." Linda lunged forward to stop her. At that exact second, Tyler Caldwell burst out of room 12 with Fisk stumbling behind him. "Back up!" Tyler shouted. Linda saw the fear on his face and knew it was real, one heartbeat before the explosion hit. The blast tore through the motel room in a violent bloom of orange and black, blowing the door off its hinges and punching shattered glass across the walkway. Rachel screamed and ducked. Ruiz hit the ground. Linda grabbed Rachel by the arm and dragged her behind a concrete pillar as heat rolled over them. Car alarms erupted across the lot. Smoke poured from room 12, thick and greasy. For a few ringing seconds, the whole world became sirens inside skulls and pieces of the building raining down. Tyler coughed hard, blood running from a cut above his eye, one hand still gripping Fisk's jacket. Linda shoved Rachel down behind the pillar and came up with her weapon drawn. "Nobody move," she shouted, though half the people in the lot were too stunned to hear her. Tyler raised both hands slowly. "Not your bomb," he said hoarsely. Fisk dropped to his knees, retching. Rachel stared at the burning doorway, horror mixing with realization. If she had been 30 seconds faster, she would have been inside. Linda looked at Tyler, then Fisk, then the ruined room. Somewhere behind them, backup units finally surged forward. "Everybody lives through the next 5 minutes," Linda said, voice like steel dragged across stone, "or I swear to God I will lose what little patience I have left." Back at the sheriff's office, Emma sat alone on the hard plastic chair outside Linda's office, because nobody had remembered that frightened teenagers could read adult faces better than adults realized. She had seen the radios light up, seen deputies hurry out in twos, seen Ruiz leave with the sheriff. The air in the station had changed the way houses changed before storms, pressure dropping, conversations thinning out. Then Deputy Benton stepped from the corridor carrying a file box. Thick neck, buzz cut, left ear bent like it had healed wrong. Emma's whole body went cold. He saw her looking, smiled, not kindly. "You okay, kid?" he asked. Emma forced herself not to react. "Fine." Benton set the file box on the counter and leaned there casually, as if they were at a school fundraiser instead of the middle of a county unraveling. "Crazy day for your family." Emma nodded once. Her pulse hammered so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Benton's eyes flicked toward Linda's empty office, then back to her. "Your dad tell you where he put it yet?" Emma said nothing. Benton gave a little shrug. "Worth asking." He picked up the file box and walked through the side door toward records. Emma sat frozen until the latch clicked shut. Then she stood, almost dizzy with certainty, and understood at last that whatever happened next, the story had crossed into a place where waiting quietly was just another way of helping the worst person in the room. She moved before she could talk herself out of it, crossing the lobby on legs that felt both numb and dangerously light, and slipped through the side door before anyone at the front desk noticed that the sheriff's daughter problem had become the sheriff's station problem. The records corridor smelled like old paper and floor wax. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Emma heard Benton's footsteps ahead of her, measured and unhurried. Then the clank of a metal door opening somewhere deeper in the building. She slowed and pressed herself against the wall at the corner. Benton's voice drifted back, low and tense now, stripped of the fake friendliness he had used in the lobby. "I'm telling you, the motel didn't solve it," he said. A pause. He was on the phone. "No, I don't know where Mercer stashed the primary copy. Fisk folded before we got there. I'm checking the basement backup." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She edged closer until she could see him through the gap between filing shelves. Benton stood at the top of the narrow stairs leading to the basement archive room, one hand on the rail, the other holding his phone to his ear. "If Garvey gets back before I'm done, then you'd better decide whether you want a scandal or a corpse," he said, then listened. His jaw flexed. "Yeah, I know what's at stake. That's why I've been cleaning up your messes for 8 months." He went down the stairs, 2 at a time. Emma stood frozen long enough to feel the whole shape of what she had heard settle into certainty. Then, she unlocked her phone with trembling fingers and started recording audio before she even knew whether she would catch anything else. She crept toward the stairwell and stopped just above the first step. Below her, Benton dragged a metal locker door open. Hinges screamed. Papers shifted. "Come on," he muttered to himself. "Come on." Emma leaned farther, enough to see the top of his head and one shoulder. He was pulling folders, a banker's box, and what looked like an external hard drive from a narrow cage marked C. Her sneaker squeaked faintly on the concrete edge of the step. Benton looked up instantly. For one impossible second, they stared at each other from opposite ends of the stairwell, both equally stunned. Then his expression changed from surprise to something much colder. "Emma," he said. She ran. She hit the corridor at full speed, nearly losing traction on the waxed floor, and heard his boots pounding after her almost at once. "Emma!" he shouted. "Stop running and I won't hurt you." That was the sentence that made her run harder, because nobody decent ever said it like that. She rounded the corner toward the lobby, but Benton caught the back of her hoodie before she made it halfway. The fabric yanked tight against her throat. She choked and twisted, slamming into a file cabinet hard enough to knock framed commendations crooked on the wall. Her phone flew from her hand and skidded beneath a chair. Benton pinned her against the metal cabinet with one forearm. His breath smelled like coffee and nicotine. "You should have stayed where the adults put you," he hissed. Emma drove her knee upward on instinct, sloppy but hard enough to make him grunt and loosen his grip. She shoved off him and screamed. This time the sound carried. A clerk at the far desk looked up in shock. Benton reached into his jacket, flashed his badge, and barked, "Family emergency, go back inside." The clerk hesitated, confused by authority and fear, the way civilians always were. Benton seized Emma by the arm and dragged her back toward the stairwell. "Move," he said through his teeth. "You touch me again and I'll break your wrist." Emma tried to twist free, but his grip only tightened. On the motel side of town, Linda Garvey was getting the truth in fragments sharp enough to cut. Deputy Fisk sat on the curb wrapped in a motel blanket, face gray under the flash of patrol lights, while EMTs checked him for shrapnel and smoke inhalation. Tyler Caldwell stood 20 feet away with dried blood at his temple, refusing treatment and refusing to leave. Rachel, shaken and furious, kept demanding answers from anyone who would hold still long enough to hear her. Linda crouched in front of Fisk. "Start with Benton," she said. Fisk looked at the ground. "You already know. I know enough to arrest him. I need enough to hold everyone else." Fisk swallowed. Benton ran pickups for Sutter. Intimidation mostly. Leans on inspectors, follows people, scares the right wives and the right kids. Rachel closed her eyes at that, one hand going to her mouth. Linda's voice stayed flat. "And Mercer?" Caldwell said Mercer found the burial photos, real evidence. Sutter wanted either the files back or Mercer discredited before he could hand them to anybody outside county channels. Linda asked. "The motel bomb?" Fisk shook his head frantically. "That wasn't Benton. That came from Sutter's people outside us. Caldwell was supposed to bring Mercer in at the gas station. When Caldwell got himself killed, everybody started improvising." Tyler barked a harsh laugh. "That sounds like Mark." Linda turned to him. "Your brother left backup copies in the county records basement." Tyler studied her, then nodded once. "Locker C." Rachel's head snapped toward him. "How do you know that?" Tyler's face did something strange then, as if grief and disgust had finally become indistinguishable. "Because the widow of a man my brother helped poison called me 10 minutes before your sheriff got here. Seems the dead leave a lot of enemies with long memories." Linda rose so fast, Fisk flinched. Her radio crackled at that exact moment. A dispatcher's voice, clipped and urgent. "Sheriff, possible disturbance in the records corridor. We lost visual on Deputy Benton. Civilian juvenile involved." Linda's whole body went cold. "Emma," Rachel said, already moving toward her car. Linda caught her by the elbow. "You are not driving like this. My daughter is in that building. And mine are the people with guns." Rachel stared at her, and Linda saw the impossible math in her face, the animal refusal to be left behind. Linda let go. "Ride with me." Daniel heard the first shout through 2 doors and a hallway. He stood from the interview room chair so fast it scraped backward. A deputy at the outer desk glanced up but did not move, apparently assuming the noise belonged to ordinary station chaos. Then Daniel heard Emma scream his name. Everything inside him went white and narrow. He hit the door with his shoulder. Once. Twice. The old latch gave on the third hit, and the door flew open into the corridor. The deputy at the desk cursed and rose. "Mercer, stop!" Daniel barely saw him. He sprinted toward the records wing just as Benton dragged Emma through the stairwell door and down into the basement. Emma was fighting now in jerky, desperate bursts. "Dad!" she yelled. Benton spun, one hand hauling her down the stairs, the other drawing his service weapon. "Back off!" he shouted. Daniel stopped at the top of the stairwell because a gun changed everything. Because one bad move in a tight concrete shaft could put a bullet through his daughter before anybody else got to feel brave. Emma was crying hard now, not pretty tears but choking panic and fury. Benton pressed the muzzle against the side of her neck. "Tell him to move back," he said. Emma shook her head violently. "Don't listen to him." Benton dug the barrel in harder. Daniel lifted both hands. "Okay," he said, voice raw. "Okay, take me instead." Benton laughed once. "That's not how leverage works." He backed them both down the remaining steps and kicked open the basement archive door. Daniel stayed at the top, every muscle shaking with the effort not to rush him. The deputy from the desk had called for help but wasn't close enough to shoot clean. The station felt suddenly too large and too small at once. Every second stretched thin over disaster. In the basement, Benton shoved Emma toward the wall beside the open locker cage and began sweeping papers and drives into the file box he had brought down earlier. "Your father thinks he's the only one who knows how to hide things," he said. Emma's eyes darted over the room, taking in details because fear made everything sharp. Metal shelves, dust, a dehumidifier humming in the corner, an old fire extinguisher mounted by the door, her phone, maybe still upstairs, her recording, maybe still running. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. Partly because she wanted him talking, partly because if she stopped talking she might start begging. Benton gave her an incredulous look. "Because mortgages don't pay themselves, and powerful men don't like hearing no." "You threatened kids." "No," he said as he jammed folders into the box. "I visited kids. Threats are what people imagine when they already know they're exposed." He glanced up at the stairs. "Your dad should have stayed scared. Fear was keeping him alive." Daniel took one slow step downward. Benton snapped the gun toward him. "I said, stay put." Daniel froze. "You get out of this building and you think Sutter saves you?" Daniel asked. Benton smiled without humor. "Save me? No. But he might pay me enough to disappear." The smile faded. "You should understand that. Men like us don't get institutions. We get arrangements." Emma looked at her father and saw, with fresh and painful clarity, how much this sentence had probably shaped him long before today. Men like us. Men from the wrong family, the wrong side of town, the wrong line of work. Men who learned early that systems protected themselves, not them. Daniel said quietly, "That's the lie they sold you so you do the ugly parts for cheap." Benton's face twitched. For the first time, something personal entered it. "Easy for you to say now. You still had a family to go home to." Daniel almost answered, then stopped because Rachel standing in the doorway of memory was not an argument he could spend, while Emma had a gun at her neck. "Let her go," he said. "You can walk out with me." Benton shook his head. "I walk out with the files and the girl. That's how I buy the next hour." Sirens rose outside the station. More units arriving. Linda. Daniel heard them and saw Benton hear them too. Pressure shifted in the room like weather. Benton grabbed the file box, then jerked Emma in front of him again. "Move," he ordered, heading toward the back service hall that connected to old maintenance stairs and, beyond them, a rear loading exit few civilians knew existed. Emma stumbled, then saw the fire extinguisher on the wall beside her shoulder. She did not think. She reacted. Her hand shot out, grabbed the metal cylinder by the neck, and yanked with all the strength panic gave her. The bracket tore loose with a clang. Benton turned toward the sound too late. Emma swung wildly and caught his gun arm near the wrist. The shot went off into the ceiling. Dust and plaster rained down. Daniel launched himself down the stairs. Benton slammed backward into the locker cage. The file box burst open, papers exploding across the floor like frightened birds. Emma dropped with the extinguisher and scrambled away on hands and knees. Daniel hit Benton mid-chest and drove him into the shelving. They crashed sideways. The gun skittered under a table. Benton was younger, thicker, trained enough to know where to put an elbow. Daniel was desperate and carried 10 years of buried rage in his shoulders. They tore at each other in the narrow aisle between shelves, grunting, slipping on scattered documents. Benton hammered Daniel's ribs with short punches, and got one arm around his throat. Daniel saw black at the edges of his vision. Then Emma, coughing through dust, screamed, "Dad, left!" He jerked sideways just as Benton reached for a utility blade clipped inside his vest. The blade flashed past Daniel's cheek and sliced only air. Daniel trapped Benton's wrist with both hands, drove his forehead into Benton's nose, and felt cartilage give. Benton howled. The basement door burst open. Linda came in low with Ruiz behind her, weapons drawn. "Drop it!" she shouted. Everything happened at once. Benton twisted, using Daniel as partial cover. Rachel, ignoring every shouted order, rushed in behind the deputies and lunged toward Emma. Benton saw movement and made the worst choice available to him. He wrenched free of Daniel long enough to snatch the dropped blade and grab Rachel by the shoulder, hauling her in front of him. The move was clumsy because of the blood pouring from his nose, but clumsy enough was still enough. Emma screamed for her mother. Rachel's face went white, then hard. There was one stunned heartbeat in which the whole room recognized the geometry. Gun on the floor, knife at Rachel's throat, Emma exposed. Daniel on one knee, half choked, half risen. Linda, with a shot she did not like. Benton, backing toward the maintenance hall. "Move," Benton panted to Rachel. "Move now." Rachel looked directly at Daniel over Benton's arm. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not resolution, just the old dangerous intimacy of knowing how someone moved under pressure. Daniel saw it and understood before Benton did. Rachel went dead weight. She dropped at once, folding her knees and driving backward with her full body into Benton's injured leg. The knife jerked away from her throat by an inch. Linda fired. The shot struck Benton high in the shoulder and spun him into the wall. He hit concrete hard and slid down, the blade clattering out of reach. Silence slammed into the room after the echo. Emma ran to Rachel. Daniel got there a half-second later. Rachel was shaking so hard she could barely breathe, but she was upright and not bleeding. Emma wrapped both arms around her and sobbed against her neck. Daniel knelt in front of them, one hand hovering uselessly in the air because he did not know who to touch first or whether he had earned the right to touch either of them at all. Rachel met his eyes over Emma's shoulder, and the look she gave him was exhausted, furious, grateful, and broken all at once. "You don't get to almost die before telling the truth again," she said, voice trembling. Daniel nodded because it was the only possible answer. Behind them, Ruiz kicked the knife away and cuffed Benton while EMTs and deputies flooded the basement. Linda stood where she had fired, breathing hard, weapon still trained until Benton stopped trying to move. Then she holstered slowly and looked down at the papers scattered across the floor. Ledgers, permit copies, drone stills, transfer records. Enough to turn whispers into cases, enough to ruin men who had believed land was more permanent than conscience. Commissioner Ben Sutter was arrested before midnight at his lake house 30 miles away, wearing loafers and a golf pullover and asking whether this was really necessary, as if annoyance were a legal defense. The State Bureau took over by dawn. News trucks descended on Ridgway County by breakfast. Men who had smiled through ribbon cuttings stopped answering their phones. The development sites were frozen. Soil testing crews arrived in white suits. Homeowners near the marsh were told not to drink from private wells until further notice. The county attorney held a press conference with a face like wet cardboard. None of it felt triumphant. It felt like rot finally split open by pressure. Daniel gave his full statement in a conference room crowded with investigators from outside agencies, 7T, because no one in Ridgway trusted the local chain of evidence anymore. He turned over the original hard drive from the storage locker after Emma and Rachel had both been moved under protective watch at Linda's insistence. He admitted what he had seen, what he had hidden, and how fear for his daughter had warped every choice after. Self-defense still covered Mark Caldwell's shooting, likely. Obstruction and delayed reporting were murkier. The district attorney would decide. Daniel accepted that with a strange calm that was not peace so much as fatigue stripped down to honesty. Emma sat with him through part of the statement and left through the middle, when she got tired of hearing adults discuss her life using words like leverage and witness exposure. Rachel found her outside on the courthouse steps just after sunrise. The town square looked scrubbed raw in morning light. News vans idled by the curb. A church volunteer was unlocking the thrift store across the street, as if normal days could still begin on schedule. Emma stared out at it all. "I keep thinking I should feel safer now," she said. Rachel sat beside her. "Do you?" Emma considered it. "Different. Not safer." Rachel nodded. "That sounds about right." Emma picked at the frayed cuff of her sleeve. "Did you know he'd try to trade himself for me?" Rachel looked toward the courthouse doors, where deputies moved in and out with boxes of evidence. "Yes," she said. "That's part of what made loving your father so hard. He would burn himself down for the people he loved, but he'd wait too long to trust them with the match. Emma absorbed that quietly. Are you getting back together with him? Rachel let out a breath that might almost have been a laugh. That is a very American teenager question at a very bad time. Emma gave the smallest ghost of a smile. Rachel's face softened. I don't know what I'm getting back to. I know I'm not walking back into silence. Through the glass doors, Daniel appeared under escort. Not handcuffed, not free. He spotted them on the steps and paused. The deputy beside him kept walking toward the parking lot. Daniel asked for 1 minute and got it. He came down the steps slowly, moving like someone who had been hit by more than fists. Bruising darkened one side of his face. A bandage crossed his cheek. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to belong and not close enough to assume. They're transferring me to Raleigh for formal processing, he said. My lawyer thinks I'll be back in 2 days, maybe sooner. Rachel folded her arms. And after that? Daniel gave a tired, crooked shrug. After that, I answer for what I did and didn't do. Emma stood. She looked at him for several seconds, and Daniel made himself bear it. Finally, she stepped forward and hugged him once, hard and fast, like someone testing whether contact would hold. He closed his eyes and wrapped his arms around her carefully, as if gratitude itself might bruise. When she pulled back, she said, No more half-truths. No more, he said. She nodded and moved away. Rachel remained where she was. You scared her in ways that won't disappear because a press conference happens, she said. Daniel swallowed. I know. You scared me too. He looked at her then. Really looked. And the old history between them felt less like nostalgia than wreckage surveyed in daylight. I know that too. Rachel's jaw tightened. Good. She rose from the step. For 1 second, it seemed she might hug him, or slap him, or say something that belonged to one of their earlier lives. Instead, she touched the bandage on his cheek with 2 fingers, a gesture so brief it could almost be denied, then let her hand fall. Don't make me carry your redemption for you, she said. Daniel's eyes stung. I won't. Sheriff Garvey watched the 3 of them from the courthouse doorway, coffee cooling untouched in her hand. She had a county to salvage, deputies to suspend, evidence chains to defend before state investigators who would assume local incompetence, and might not be wrong. She had just killed a man in her own basement. Even if policy and reason would call it justified, she felt no victory in that. Only the dense afterweight of necessity. Ruiz stepped up beside her. You all right? He asked. Linda looked out at the square, the cameras, the family on the steps, trying to invent a language for survival after being used as pressure points in other men's greed. No, she said, but I'm still standing, which in this line of work sometimes has to count. Across town, the yellow tape fluttered around half-built homes that might never be finished. At the gas station off I-95, somebody had already replaced the broken neon sign, and travelers who had no idea what happened there kept pulling in for coffee and fuel. In Ridgeway County, the earth itself would be tested now, dug into, measured for poison, asked to give up what had been buried in it. People would lose money, lose jobs, lose reputations they had mistaken for character. Some would deserve it. Some would just be nearby when the ground opened. Nothing about that felt clean. Daniel was led toward the unmarked sedan, waiting at the curb. Emma slipped her hand into Rachel's. Rachel held on. Neither of them waved as he got in. The car door shut. The vehicle pulled away through the slow-moving press vans and the courthouse shadows, taking with it no promise except this one. The truth had finally surfaced, and it had cost exactly what truth usually costs in places built on fear, which was more than anyone wanted to pay, and still not enough to make the damage disappear.